My name's Miranda Rechtenwald, and I am one of two people working as coordinating the Mapping LGBTQ project. Andrea Friedman, who I will mention later, was going to join us this evening, but had a last minute engagement come up. So we are recording tonight's discussion, but we will stop recording at the end of the presentation about the site, and we will not record the question and answer section. So if you'd rather not show your face as part of the recording or not be recorded on audio, you don't need to be. This will be a fairly succinct overview of the project, and then we will have plenty of time for questions and answers afterwards. So if you could, remain muted during the presentation, but if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And then once we get to the question and answer, if folks would like to raise their hand or raise their digital hand, or in the video, either way, that's fine, and we can be a little bit more casual. So if you do have any technical issues, you can put a message in the chat, and my coworker Lauren is going to keep an eye on that and let me know if anything comes up while we're going over the site. So with that, we will get started. Welcome to those of you who've just joined us. This is Virtual Pride, Mapping LGBTQ St. Louis. It is a virtual presentation as we are still working on social distancing, of course. So just to let you know, I am always happy to talk about Mapping LGBTQ St. Louis and tell you a little bit about it. I'm happy to do that this month as part of Pride Month, but I've also certainly done presentations, some of which we have recorded, and I can share links to those if you're interested, that I have done for Black History Month, for LGBTQ History Month, which is October, for Women's History Month. Pretty much if there's an occasion to talk about it, I'm happy to do so. So here's two ways you can get to the mapping website, and I'd encourage you to explore it some more after the program concludes. So, so what is Mapping LGBTQ St. Louis? Let me start with that. And for those of you who have come to my presentations before, some of this you probably already know, but for folks who are new, this is a fully digital project. It is looking at the history of 1945 to 1992, so roughly after World War II through the early 1990s. And we look at how things like race, class, gender, and sexuality intersect with geography. Yeah, Lauren's put the link in the chat box if anyone wants to copy and paste that and take a look after the presentation. So we are really interested in a lot of things at once. We're looking at history, but we're also looking at geography, and we're also looking at understanding how people's aspects of their identity influence that history. And so that is a little bit about the site. It is free and open to everyone. It is fully online. And just to give you a little background, if you have looked at the site before, the research for this began in 2015. And by 2017, actually October 2017, it was published online. And the image below on the left is what the first published site looked like, basically. And this site actually is still online. We have not taken it down yet, but we do have a new site that eventually this will point people to. So in 2019, early 2019, we received additional grant funding from the Divided Cities Initiative, which is fabulous. That was going to help cover some in-person events we were going to have, and also some additional cleanup and new interface pages we're designing. And of course, that got very, very delayed. And so while we had intended on having that up by the spring of 2020, that didn't happen. So over the course of the past year, we've cleaned up the data, we've added new content, we've added the new interface, which is the interface you see on the right, which is mobile friendly, which is a fabulous addition that the old site was not particularly mobile friendly. And that went online this spring, and that's what I'm going to show you today. And I always want to acknowledge that this is not just a couple of folks who make this happen. This is many folks. Myself and Andrea Friedman in the Women and Gender Studies program of Arts and Sciences, and myself in Special Collections at the University Libraries, we are the co-directors or co-stewards of this project, but it certainly would not happen without many other people, including community volunteers, our fabulous library colleagues in data services and GIS, and a number of graduate and undergraduate assistants who have worked on the project over the years. So really, we look at very complex topics. And so what I'm going to show you is just a very brief overview of how some of the ways you can explore the project on your own time, but just to kind of give you a sense of where we're going. And one of the things that the project really tries to do is take history, gather it together, and put it into a geocoded format. That is always a little bit easier said than done. Because not every location for an event is known. Some of those required a great deal of additional research from newspaper clippings, from things like gay travel guides, such as the Dameron, and even a handwritten travel guide that we were able to get access to that was that has been digitized by the Smithsonian. All sorts of documents from archives, not just at Washington University, but locally and from other archives. We compiled these into spreadsheets, which then got winnowed down with duplicates being combined. And today we have 820 locations mapped. That isn't 820 unique sites. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Each of these locations are mapped and show up as a little dot. So if a location fell into more than one category, for instance, the Chase Park Plaza was known as it certainly was a restaurant and a bar. It had Buddy Walton's beauty salon that operated out of it. It was also rented for religious functions. So it shows up multiple times, each coded as a different type of space: restaurant, bar, business, religious, and I think also social events or show up there too. So the same location may have multiple points, but we did that so that you could get a good sense of the types of places that are occurring. And so here's the new site. It starts with this page called Explore Mapping LGBTQ St. Louis. And this looks relatively the same whether you're on a computer, a tablet, or your phone. On a phone, it kind of compresses a little bit. But basically, as you scroll through the site, you'll get to a welcome, which gives a little overview, much like I just informed you of. And then you'll get to this Explore section. And the Explore section has these buttons, and this is something new to the new interface. And as you click these buttons, each of the different categories show up by color so that you can filter and see those locations. So for instance, here is healthcare medical, just showing those sites. And you can also click back to show all. If you would like to go further than just kind of clicking through, and you can also look at each of these and has a little pop-up box, but you can also look at the interactive map. Let me show you what that looks like, although I have to preface this by saying I was on the site beforehand and something in the search bar wasn't quite working right. So if you search tonight, it's not going to work right potentially, but I'll be working on that tomorrow. So each location, as you click on the spot, it will pop up a box and it will tell you the location name. If it has alternative names, so here for Forest Park Community College, it's giving you the name of the Performing Arts Center, as well as the address, our classification. And here we have start dates and end dates. And those are dates that it's associated with the LGBTQ community, not the dates that it existed sometimes that continues quite on. And then there's also a link, which is kind of covered up by this little pop-out bar here, that says link to more. And in that case, for sites that we have lots of more information about, some of which we have a lot more about, then there's a page that opens with a page or two more of text, and we're working on growing those. This here on the right side is showing you the search box, which as of about 15 minutes ago was not working for some unknown reason. I'm not sure if that was my computer or the system, but if you don't see the search box right away, I'll be working on fixing that tomorrow. And this interactive site also allows you to view by area, so you can click on some different parks and neighborhoods and it'll zoom you to those areas. As well as down here at the bottom, you can look at kind of the raw data in chart format, and you can also download this if this is something you would want to use in another project. So a lot of different ways that we're hoping this is able to be used and interacted with. So also new to the site, very exciting. This is our biggest addition, which is what we're calling guided tours. And so we have a number of new guided tours added to the site, which I will walk through. One of these is a timeline of political actions and events. That was on the site before, but the interface and the content has been updated to the new site. So I'm going to just kind of walk you through these and give you a little taste of them, and I hope you'll be able to explore them more on your own. So first we have a tour of two bars, Bill's Bar and Zebra Lounge, and this is looking at space for Black LGBTQ life in St. Louis. And it really just recounts these two bars and talks about how they were particular spaces for both Black and white individuals in St. Louis, but how that meaning changed and what it meant for the women who went to Bill's Bar and Grill, which was near the Ville and the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex, what that meant for them to have a space of their own, and what the Zebra Lounge meant as a place that was one of the few locations that purposely sought out a mixed clientele and was purposeful in welcoming both Black and white patrons. Looking at racial division is one of the topics that we come back to in many of the tours. And so Zebra Lounge is some fascinating history of that. We also look at Miss Fanny's Ball, which is the earliest Black drag ball in tradition in St. Louis. And so we look at some of the early history of that, going back to the 50s, all the way through the 70s, and explore that tradition. And then we also look just geographically. So we look at Forest Park and all of the different things that happened in Forest Park. So many different LGBTQ people found the park a youthful gathering place. It is a long-standing common place for cruising and finding partners. And so the very beloved Cannon is pictured here. This is in a 1970s travel guide featuring locations in St. Louis. And it's also the location of Pride festivities in St. Louis, starting in 1980 and going through 1997. So here on the left is a bit of the 1981 program showing where the tour is. And actually what you don't see is at the bottom is the note where they had to quickly reprint it, because the rally was going to be at Washington University and the Quad. It was going to, there would be a march nearby as there was in 1980, and then they were going to end at the Quad as they did in 1980. But in 1981, the march and festivities moved to June instead of April, like in 1980. And the university was not thrilled with the idea of this. That's an interesting bit of history that I'm going to tease you with. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be looking specifically at WashU history and LGBTQ history and how those two intersect. and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But the short version is that the 1980 event was in April and was part of a kind of student run program in addition to community program. By June, that was all community members, and they just didn't seem to have the connections on campus to keep that connection going. We also link in these short tours to things like articles, and also here we link to a timeline of Pride events. So if that's something that interests you, throughout these short tours are links to more things to give you some more information to expand on. Based on feedback that we got after the initial site published in 2017, several people told us that they found it very interesting, but they were maybe newer to St. Louis, or they didn't really know St. Louis history. And so they were interested in just kind of an overview. So we added this short tour, which we call Connecting the Dots. And it really is just a very general overview and looks at kind of regions. We discuss and explore how St. Louis is really a city that's split between two states. And here you see a map that's highlighting the 3 counties in Illinois on the east side that we include in the mapping project, not just St. Louis City and County, but also the 3 counties adjacent in Illinois. And we talk about the fact that St. Louis City and St. Louis County have different laws, different rules, different patterns of housing by class and race and community. And so Connecting the Dots has a number of more maps than the others, including a map that you see here at the bottom, where you can compare and slide the map back and forth and see what is in St. Louis City versus not. And so it gives you just kind of a visual way to look at those dots on the map in a bit of a different way. And then we also have a story, a tour that looks at the story of More or Less, which is a women's bar in 1979 that opened in St. Louis and South City. And we look at the history of women's bars that are on the south side of St. Louis, and also More or Less and the nearby Lesbian Alliance are 2 locations that were destroyed by arson, crimes that to this day remain unsolved. And so that's a unique piece of LGBTQ history here in St. Louis. So we wanted to really kind of highlight that aspect, not just of women's history, but also lesbian history and, again, geography. And finally, as I mentioned, the political actions and organizing timeline. So this was expanded, and so now you can go through each of the sites and there are more images to show, and it looks at places where groups organized, where groups met, where protests were held, where significant actions took place. I think we have about 40 locations on that map. And I will say the original essay tours, or tours as we called them, or we're now calling them extended tours, those do remain online. And right now they are still in the original format, which scrolls a bit differently than the new site. But my hope is that we will be transitioning those over the rest of 2021. The content would remain essentially the same, but they would transition into the mobile friendly layout. So they'd look very similar, but the technical side would be different. And so these extended tours are still linked on the new page. And I will point these out to you if you haven't seen them before. We have one that focuses on the impact of segregation. It looks at how is LGBTQ life segregated or not segregated in St. Louis, and uses some census data to compare where mapped locations are versus where the population in St. Louis was living. And then we also have a tour called Beyond Gender Binaries, one that focuses on sex in the city. Both of these take different aspects and look at components of St. Louis LGBTQ history, things like who can be themselves in public, where are people welcomed, people who are outside of the gender binary or interested in living a life that is not conventional gender binary. Those are all stories highlighted in these tours. And then finally, we do have a page that actually goes through and talks about how the project was created in detail. So if that interests you, I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And it goes through a bit of the research, and we will be updating that about page. Currently, it just has through 2017, and so we'll be adding an addition to talk about the update, but that that is going online soon. Other future things, so just to let you know, right now, Andrew Friedman is working on adding an additional tour that we're calling Out with Love, which is looking at religion and LGBTQ life in St. Louis. So I don't really have much to show you there, but we're hoping that will go up soon. That is going to go much beyond just the story of Trinity Episcopal, but the story of Trinity Episcopal is one that we will be highlighting there. If you aren't aware, they are now designated in the Central West End as a site that is on the National Historic Register. And it is the first site in the state of Missouri that is recognized on the National Historic Register for its significance with LGBTQ history. So we want to highlight that, but also all of the other places, many places from various religious institutions and denominations across the city. And we'll also be incorporating more stories from the oral histories that were recorded from the Documenting the Queer Past class in St. Louis and other oral histories done since the 2017 map published. So those are things we're looking forward to in the future. I want to open things up for questioning, but as I do that, I also want to let you know and encourage you to keep in touch. You can certainly contact me by email. We also have a contact us form that's linked on, I think, every single page of the mapping site. Feel free, if you ever see anything that isn't working or doesn't seem to work, I'd love to hear about it. Shoot us a message. Or shoot me an email. We also are on Twitter. That's our only social media we're on currently, is we're on Twitter. So I do post if we have new things released, we'll post it on Twitter. So if you'd like to keep up with updates, you can follow us there.